الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن عليًا ولي الله أشهد أن عليًا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله
الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have been looking at the teachings of Ahlul Bayt with regard to our livelihood and our earnings. And today I would like to look at some of the recommendations we have from the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt about what kind of occupations and sources of income are recommended and are blessed. And of course, much has changed in society and in the economy since the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have technological changes, we have a very different economy back in the time of our Prophet and our Imams, and even for centuries afterwards. The majority of people, they were engaged in agriculture, And some of them lived a subsistence lifestyle, meaning they would just be able to produce enough for themselves and their family. Others, they may have farmed on a larger scale and earned some income for their produce, but most people, they were engaged directly or indirectly in agriculture. So it was said that the economy was an agrarian economy, not an industrial or a service-based economy. And for much of human history, up until the very recent past, people, alaykum salam, would produce a lot of their needs at home. So you wouldn't spend money to get a haircut or even sometimes to have clothing, but that would be sewn, it would be produced, it would be performed, it would be cooked, it would be prepared at home. Not by the transfer of money, but just by the effort of people within the household. So many things have changed. Our life has changed. But certain principles and certain priorities, they remain. Alaykum as-salam. And that is what we will look at, inshallah, with some of these hadith. One of the ahadith that we have from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is that it is recommended to engage in agriculture. There were different cultures. Some of them, they looked down on agriculture for religious reasons, for cultural reasons, maybe because it wasn't fashionable or it wasn't classy. And sometimes we have that kind of a prejudice in our society as well. Maybe very sophisticated or urban people may look down on rural people and that culture associated with farming. But it was something that was practiced by Ahlul Bayt to engage in agriculture personally, even though they didn't have economic need and they didn't have any shortage of people who could take care of their material needs for them within their households. And among their supporters and their followers, people would consider it an honor to work for the imams. But our imams would go into the fields themselves, and they would, alaykum as-salam, work because there is a barakah in it. So it's narrated that a person came to the Prophet and said, "Ju'iltu fidak, O Messenger of Allah, may Allah make me a ransom for you. Asma'u qawman yaqulun inna az-zira'ata makruha." To farm is makruh. It isn't something that is liked or blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet responded, "Izra'u waghrisu, fala wallahi ma amila an-nasu amalan ahalla wala atyaba min." No, go and engage in agriculture, plant, and bring up produce that you can consume, because there is no earning and there is no action that is more halal and more blessed than that. So it is recommended, and it was also the sunnah of the Prophet. Not necessarily as a career, but if you are able to plant, have a small garden, then there is a tranquility that comes from it, and there is a barakah that comes from it. It can be in your yard, and some of us, we don't quite have a yard, so you can do it on a patio or a porch, or even indoors. But if it's possible to keep a connection with the earth, it's part of God's creation, and to plant and to benefit from food that we have grown ourselves, then that's something that is encouraged. And it's not something that we should look down on as a career or an occupation, even if it might not be our occupation. In a similar hadith, our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, he says, خَيْرُ الْأَعْمَالِ زَرْعٌ يَزْرَعُهُ فَيَأْكُلُ مِنْهُ الْبَرُّ وَالْفَاجِرُ. The Imam says that one of the best actions, or the best action that a person can do, is to plant something, and then it grows and it bears fruit. فَيَأْكُلُ مِنْهُ الْبَرُّ وَالْفَاجِرُ. And those who are pious, they will eat from it, and those who are not pious, they will also eat from it. So one of the reasons why farming is encouraged and blessed in Islam is because it provides a general benefit, not just to those who are believers and are pious, but to all of humanity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the sustainer, the raziq of all of humanity, even those people that I may not like or I may not admire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is their creator. And He calls and invites all of humanity towards Him, and He gives them many chances, even when we have committed sins and we have made mistakes. Alaikum salam. That's one of the reasons for the barakah of farming. Related to that is a piece of advice that we have from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. And the specific example that the Imam mentions may or may not be relevant to some of us, but the principle the Imam mentions is relevant to many of us. The Imam said to a companion of his that if you have extra money, اتخذ عقدة أو ضيعة. Go and purchase and then maintain a garden or an orchard or some income-producing property. فإن الرجل إذا نزلت به النازلة أو المصيبة فذكر أن وراء ظهره ما يقيم عياله كان أسخى لنفسه. If a person has something as a backup source of food, security, and income, there is something there. إذا نزلت به النازلة أو المصيبة. If that person suffers a trial or a hardship or a calamity in life, you lose your job, God forbid. You have a very large unforeseen expense or a health issue or something like that. When you have something that you have prepared as a backup source of support and income or food, then the Imam says, كَانَ أَسْخَى لِنَفْسِهِ. It means that you are more likely to be generous and not to all of a sudden become overly worried and concerned and cancel all of your help to your family and to your community and say, I can't give any donations because you have something else. So now that specific example, this might not work in our economy today, that when I have some extra income, I buy a plot of land and farm it, and then I use that produce to support myself. It still exists in some parts of the world and in some contexts. But the principle the Imam is speaking of is relevant to many of us. Because sometimes we live very well when we are doing well, and then when things are not going so well, we automatically now minimize our expenses, we cancel our contributions, our donations, our assistance to others, and we become very worried about our well-being. But instead of that, when you have an extra income, don't just use it on consumption and say, let me upgrade my lifestyle. What the Imam is saying is that if you are able, go and purchase something that can be a source of support for you, a source of income for you. In the time of the Imams, of course, the example of that would have been a plot of land. That you can plant fruit or you can plant some vegetables or something, and then you can benefit from it or you can sell it for income. In our time, it might be real estate, it might be a rental property, it might be investing in a business, but the same principle will apply even if the times and the economy has changed. And notice the wisdom of what the Imam is saying. He says that if you have something, كَانَ أَسْخَى لِنَفْسِهِ, it'll make you more generous. Now, why should we be generous? In reality, the rizq comes from Allah. If I don't have a backup source of income, can Allah provide for me from unexpected places? وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. Allah can, and He does, and He promises it in the Quran. مَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. Allah will give you rizq from where you least expect it. You don't need a backup income. And if I have a backup source of income and Allah doesn't want to give me risk, then is it going to come to my benefit? Can that backup property, many people in COVID, they might have had a rental property and then all of a sudden their renter didn't pay rent for a while and people went in hardship. The backup might not work. And without a backup, if Allah wants, He can give you assistance. But the Imam says, although we rely on Allah and we trust, وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ, it is good to set up your life to make it easier to be generous. Let me repeat that because it's a very important life lesson. Don't just rely on your taqwa. Don't just rely on the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say that, well, if I truly believe, then regardless of the circumstances, I'm going to obey Allah. Plan your life. Plan your job. Where you live. Where you locate yourself. What kind of career you choose. What kind of investments you make. So that you make it easier for yourself to have good choices and good decisions. Give yourself a secondary support and source of income, and it'll be easier for you to do tawakkul and rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be generous. That's not going to substitute for taqwa, but it will facilitate taqwa. Associate yourself with an environment that makes it easy for you to avoid sin, because you are not always talking to people whose only concern, their hum and their gham in this world is material advancement. When you live and you associate with people who care about the akhirah, it'll be easier for you to also focus on what's truly important. That doesn't substitute for inner piety, but it makes it easier. So what the Imam is saying is give yourself a financial plan, and in general give yourself an environment that makes it easier for you to be pious and muttaqi. If you have savings, if you have investment and a backup income, kana askha li nafsih. It'll be easier for you to be generous. But you still trust in Allah. Don't trust in that backup investment, because it can go south as well. And yet, living your life and planning your life in that way, it makes it easier for you to deal with hardship, calamity, nazila, musibah, as the Imam says. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We are also taught, in particular for farmers, but also as a general principle, that we should treat our earnings as not just our property, but as something that should be a source of blessing for others as well. It is said in a hadith from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, he says that it is good not to pick fruit at night. Don't harvest your produce at night. Don't sacrifice an animal. If you sacrifice an animal during Eid al-Adha or for any other purpose, don't do that udhiyah, that sacrifice, at night. If you plant, then don't plant your seeds in a garden at night. Why? فَإِنَّكَ إِن تَفْعَلْ لَمْ يَأْتِكَ الْقَانِعُ وَالْمُعْتَرُ. The Imam says if you do those things at night, then fewer people are going to find out. And the qani' and the mu'tar will not come to you. And this is from a verse of Quran which says, وَأَطْعِمُ الْقَانِعَ وَالْمُعْتَرُ. Give food to al-qani' wal-mu'tar. So people said to the Imam, مَا الْقَانِعُ وَالْمُعْتَرُ. Who are you referring to? Why does the Imam want us to pick fruit or to harvest or to plant or to sacrifice? In other words, these are times when you are profiting from the effort you made. If you are a farmer, harvesting, picking the fruit, that's when you are going to now finally get the benefit of all the effort you put in. The Imam says, do it in the daytime so people can see you. Why? So that al-qani' wal-mu'tar can be present. The Imam says, al-qani' alladhi yaqna'u bima a'taytahu, wal-mu'tar alladhi yamurru bika fayas'aluk. There are two types of people who are needy. Some people, they have an inner kind of pride or dignity, and either they won't ask or they'll be happy with whatever you give them. Then that's al-qani', who has contentment. And then there are those people who will ask you that, can you give me this? And if you give them something and they think they need more, they will say, can you give me more? The Quran says that at'imul qani' wal mu'tar. Give both to those that you might admire because they are dignified and they have pride. Usually most people, we are much more willing to help somebody who seems like they don't want to ask. But when somebody asks us, then it kind of takes away part of the motivation for us to help them. Sometimes it might take away all of the motivation. The Quran says, no, give to both. Because sometimes people who ask, they might just be more desperate. They might just have a different personality, or whatever the circumstances are, give. And do your harvesting and your other activities in such a way that they will find out, so they can come to you. And that's a very beautiful teaching of Islam, and that we can apply it beyond just a sacrifice of an animal or harvesting of fruit or vegetables, but in life, when you have received a blessing. I would have said if you win the lottery, then don't do so anonymously, that your family and friends know. But of course, a Muslim would not win the lottery because they would never play the lottery. But if you win the figurative lottery in life, you get a windfall. Figurative lottery, the actual lottery is not something that we play and that we participate in. But figuratively, if you win the lottery, you get a benefit. Then don't hide it. وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. Of course, that verse has many greater interpretations about iman and about wilayah, but one of the lower, also valid interpretations is if you have a worldly blessing, let people know so that they can come and they can ask you. Al-qani', give to them. Al-mu'tar, give to them. Share with them so that you will be able to spread the ni'mah and the blessings that Allah has given you, and show gratitude to Allah so He will increase your bounty and your blessing. So this was about agriculture and some of the ahadith pertaining to agriculture. We also have ahadith that indicate a person should have livestock. Many of us, we live in an urban or a suburban environment, and it might not be possible. But if you are able to have maybe a few chickens at home or an animal at home, that's also something that was the practice, and it was recommended by Ahlul Bayt. According to a hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa he says, "Alaykum bil ghanami wal harth," that keep agriculture and livestock as part of your life. فَإِنَّهُمَا يَرُوحَانِ بِخَيْرٍ وَيَغْدُوَانِ بِخَيْرٍ. They give you blessings morning and evening. Having livestock, having something that you are growing and planting in your home, that gives you barakah day and night, or morning and evening. And according to a hadith of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, every prophet that was sent was a prophet who had engaged in work as a shepherd, and that was training for patience, for humility, for being down to earth. It was training for a person to be a prophet. So these are things that are recommended. But the lessons that we learn, as we have discussed from these ahadith, they are not exclusive to people who are farmers or have animals. They apply to how we think of our wealth and how we plan for our finances to reinforce the values of generosity and gratitude and humility, so that it becomes easier for us to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى فاطمة الزهراء وعلى الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين صلوات. In the second khutbah, after seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for myself and all of us present and all mu'mineen and mu'minat, I want to just briefly look at a couple of hadith about tijarat. Because after agriculture and livestock, one of the things that Ahlul Bayt have emphasized is commerce. There are a hadith from our Prophet, from Imam Ali, to the effect that barakah in terms of earnings is divided into 10 parts. 9/10 of the barakah that you can get is in commerce. And Islam has strongly emphasized an entrepreneurial spirit to engage in commerce and to try to ensure that we are self-sufficient and that we take risks and trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us. A very beautiful hadith from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. And even though, as I said, economy and times have changed greatly, but this question is almost relevant today as it was 1,200 years ago for many people starting out in their career, recent graduate from a professional school or from college. A person came to Imam Ja'far Sadiq and said, "Ar-rajul yattajir." A person can engage in commerce. وَإِنْ هُوَ آجَرَ نَفْسَهُ أُعْطِيَ أَكْثَرَ مِمَّا يُصِيبُ فِي تِجَارَتِهِ. But if I work for somebody else, then I'll get a higher salary. So let's say I just graduated, I can start my own business. I'll have to get my own clients and I'll have to do my own work, and I'm going to earn maybe half of what I would earn if I went to work for somebody else. If I become an employee of another business, then my income will be higher. The Imam says, now this is not a universal in all circumstances, but it is a general principle. The Imam is reminding us of the value of having control of your own livelihood and then having that desire to work hard and to better your circumstances. The Imam says, لا يؤاجر نفسه ولكن يسترزق الله تعالى ويتجر. Don't hire yourself out to somebody else and work for somebody else. If you are able, you have the talent, you have the ability, the resources, the experience, then trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seek His sustenance, and go and engage in commerce. فَإِنَّهُ إِذَا آجَرَ نَفْسَهُ حَضَرَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ الرِّزْقِ. If you work for somebody else, then you are limiting your possibility of advancement, and you are preventing yourself from reaching your full potential, because your effort will in the end go to the benefit of somebody else before it comes to your own benefit. Once again, this is a general principle to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trust in yourself, and to have that spirit of initiative. Get the experience, get good advice. You may have to work for somebody else to gain that experience as an apprentice, as a mentee, but then Ahlul Bayt encouraged us to engage in commerce and to have entrepreneurial spirit, to take the initiative and to better our worldly circumstances. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of us abundant rizq, but more even than the abundance, may Allah bless us in our lives and in our livelihoods, in our personal lives and our families and our communities. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. So I believe the microphone is not working, so I'll be reading the Jamaat without the microphone because I can't attach it. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على